So good afternoon. I understand I'm here in Paris, but speaking in English. So I hope the French speakers will not be too sad to put a headset if they need translation. And I'm very pleased that the École de Guerre team and the different organizers of this afternoon of discussion thought of inviting a former representative of the French government. I was Minister for Public Service for a few years, and therefore I will share not only some ideas coming from the OECD, where I'm currently the French ambassador, but also sharing some personal experience on how the French state tried to recruit in a time of, indeed, competition for talent. So I was willing first to start with a paradox. The current young generation, which I could include myself in some ways, has come on the job market in the last years in a very peculiar moment. This generation was raised in a time where unemployment was large in many of our countries. Their parents, their uncles, their relatives were all fearing to be fired off. So they came now in a time which is very different. In many of our countries, we are knowing at the moment very low, not to say historically low, level of unemployment. So on the one hand, this generation comes in a quite reassuring environment that gives them choice and that gives them the impression that they can indeed choose in which sector, for which company, in which way they want to work. But there is a paradox, is that this same generation has also known in the very recent years a very large number of very deep and very large sources of anxiety. COVID, the return of war on the European soil, the climate crisis. And so the paradox is that we are, at the moment, with people aged 25, maybe 30 years old, that are both in a very reassuring economic environment, but a very anxious and creating of anxiety ecosystem of crisis. And that creates a tension for all the organizations trying to recruit these people. On the one hand, organizations have to be very attractive, to show a high level of flexibility, and I will come back to there, and in a way to work on their offer. On the other side, these same people, these same talents, they know they are on a competitive market, and they are very demanding. So we have a very demanding demand, and we have an offer that tries to be competitive and attractive. If you add this crisis and this economic environment which is conducive, you have a market which is full of incoherences or even failures. The job market is supposed to be a market. Offer, demand, price, wage, and an equilibrium. We are seeing at the moment that this equilibrium is quite unstable. And a number of non-optimal functionings happen in companies, happen in public service, happen in the different features of the public service. So when I was Minister for the Public Service in France, I was appointed in this job in July 2020, so just after the first COVID lockdown. I realized that before I came there, unions and my predecessor had decided to focus their annual report in 2020 on the attractivity, we say in French, or attractiveness, the capacity of attraction of public service when it comes to recruiting. And I must say that when this report was presented and published to myself and to the public at the end of the year 2020, I made a report to the Council of Ministers saying, dear colleagues, dear President, we have a problem, is that we see for now a few years a steep decline in our capacity to recruit people. A steep decline in the number of candidates per job. A steep decline in the number of candidates to our concours, so our exams to become a civil servant. And I must say, I was received with faces of surprise, not to say even despise. Saying, in France, we have more than 5 million civil servants. For years, the debate was we have too many civil servants. That was part of the, a bit, the doxa, a bit the usual things you hear. How come that now we say we have trouble recruiting? Well, in France, like many other countries, when unemployment went down in the private sector, a number of people who said, oh, I have choice now. I can look for another job. Job security can be offered to me outside the public service, while for many years, security of employment was mostly given in the public service. So we had then to think thoroughly in a context which was not extremely politically conducive, but how to regain attractiveness, how to regain attention from the younger generations, and not only the younger generations, but just the French public, on how the state, how local authorities, how hospitals, how the army, how the different branches of the public service could be attractive to the young generations. So we developed an employer brand program, we developed a clearer platform for the job offers, and this is not what I will describe to you what we've done, but I will share just 4 ideas, lessons maybe, and I would say in French, convictions. Things I believe can be shared beyond the French borders. The first is that you have to, that's very basic, I will go quick, but it's important to remind it. We have to work on what we offer. We offer a wage, and that has not to be put too much on the side. We offer social protection, and the social protection package for civil servants in France had to be renewed because it was not as good as in the private sector. We offer tools to work with. Typically, having a good digital environment for people is very important because it creates or reduces capacity to attract new talents. We offer working conditions, which should be nice, or at least comfortable. So the places where people work are important. And we need to fight the difference between what is the reality about these factors and the stereotypes of what a civil servant is. And we've made a study. A civil servant for French young generations outside the civil service are tedious men with suits. Well, you can find many engaged, smiley women not dressed in suits in many civil service functions. But the image, the stereotype, the places where these people work in the mind of the younger generation, the way they work, papers, not computers, not AI, but a lot of bureaucracy, creates a distance between the reality and the stereotypes. And therefore, we really worked on being more transparent, on having a better communication, on having a proper strategy for attracting talents, and also to be proactive, to fight the stereotypes in being present in places where people will not expect us. In job fairs where normally you have tech companies, then we had the French state. In places where people will say, why is a ministry here? To connect in a different setting on what civil service is about and not just what civil service is perceived to be or is believed to be. So that's what we offer: a wage, tools to work, place to work, social protection, and this has to be the basics of any strategy. The second thing I realized is that the younger generations have the feeling that if they sign a contract with a public employer, it's a life choice. It's a choice for life. It's a career that you need to embrace for 40 years plus. That in a way, being recruited is being locked. And that a lot of younger generations have the impression that if they sign a contract with the state, whatever kind of employer it is, they will lose the capacity to have different experiences, to make choices in their career, and that in a way they will reduce their capacity to have a diverse job life. This led in France to very important decisions we've made, in particular for the top civil service. How can we be more flexible on what we call in French the parcours? So the different moments of your career. How can we say, okay, you start in this ministry, in this function, but we give you trust about the fact that in many occasions, you will be able to move from one ministry to another. You will be able to move from a more operational function to a more strategic function. You will be able to move also outside the public service for a while and come back. And this is extremely important in the perception that signing a contract is not to be locked down. The second is, what happens to me if I want to quit? What is my employability after 5, 10, 15 years for the public service? Will companies in the private sector, will people outside the public service value what I learned, value what I can do, value who I am after a time in the public service? The French army was one of the examples we followed for the civil public service, because the French army has this long-lasting experience of having a number of top generals, officials, leaders leaving the army and finding a good job after, because not everybody can be a 5-star general. And it is understood, and the system itself helps the people to get out in a good condition, in good jobs after. So the exit employability is not something you think about when you design an attractivity program, but it's a key feature for the trust you build with the people. If you come, you're not locked down, you will have mobility options inside the public service, or inside the army, or between the army or a defense organization and the non-defense organizations. But also, if you quit, people will look at you as somebody who has skills, who has talent, and can have a second career. And the last point is that, counterintuitively, when it came to recruiting top digital talents to help the French state to manage its digital transformation, we offered a contract where unions were extremely skeptical, not to say critical. We invented a program named Entrepreneur d'intérêt général. So it was a kind of entrepreneur for the general interest program, where instead of offering a long-term, stable contract, we were saying you come for 9 to 12 months with a wage that is well publicized, around 4,500 euros net. You work for a project, and after 9 to 12 months, you decide. You can be renewed, or you can quit. And there is no pressure about your choice today. For the same project, when we were offering long-term, typical, traditional contracts, some places received no candidates. No one was applying. The moment we designed this program with 40 to 50 different projects covering the whole French state, the whole French ministries, saying that the contracts were the same, the salary was well known, it was just for 9 to 12 months. We received up to 40 candidates per job. And in the 40 candidates per mission we were offering, I can tell you, we had the best talents from the French startup environment. We had most of the best coders, the best user experience people we know on the French market. And they were very happy to come say, I quit my startup for 9 to 12 months. I have the impression to serve my country. I feel useful. And what happened? Half of them stayed. None of them thought at the beginning that they would do this for more than 1 year. The outcome is that we managed to retain half of those profiles for contracts of 3 years, some for that will then become probably civil servants themselves. But it was an attraction mechanism that was extremely new, and unions, initially very skeptical, came to the conclusion that generations were changing. That indeed, 25 years ago, no one would sign for a contract 9 to 12 months paid 4,500 euros net. But today, it was actually functioning. So I think recruiting is not locking down people. And I think this is key in the perception that most of the generations have of what's being offered by both private and public employers. I want to come, I want to work, I need to know what happens to me if I quit, which is counterintuitive for many recruiters. Third idea, and I will be quick, people need to feel aligned with the mission of the organization, to feel that they're responsible for the meaning, that there is a sense of alignment, that a job is not just a wage. You have to share your values. It means you have to feel proud of what you do, proud of the history, proud of the achievements, proud of the collective project. And this goes with a lot of different communication and sharing and positioning of many of our organizations. Most of the public service organizations are known by the politicians who are the ministers. We try to invert the communication. Start with those on the field implementing the policies, not just showing the profiles of those deciding. To show that there is concrete and interesting and engaging work to be done with a feeling of pride. And we've done a number of short videos showing proud people smiling and talking positively about what they do, and really showing also the collective nature of the work we do in the public service. And the fourth point, and I will close here, we discovered in the French civil service that there is a large number of pools of talents that were totally outside the strategy of recruitment. We created, as the French people in the room might know, classes to prepare for the concours, so the entry exams in the civil service, in universities everywhere in the country outside Paris. Because typically, to prepare the top civil service exams, 90% were, before our reform, taking place in Paris. Just by opening classes to prepare these exams in Lyon, in Montpellier, in Toulouse, in Bordeaux, in Lille, also in universities just 20 kilometers outside Paris, in the suburbs. The profiles that will enroll in these programs are not the same at all from those coming before in the Paris elite preparatory classes. More women, much more. Typical Sciences Po classes, at best 40% of women. This class talent we open in the universities, 60% of women. The sociological background, the profile of the parents, the socioeconomic qualifications and qualities of these new candidates are very different. But what counts is that when they go to the exam, they are same or even better level than those we typically trained and form. Another type of pool of talents that were on the side is those coming from poorer backgrounds, needing money early in their lives because they don't have support from families, and say, I will stop my studies, I will stop my academic life because I need a job. If you invent training programs or exam preparatory classes in apprentissage, where you combine a revenue, a concrete experience, and a training, the pool of candidates you manage to attract is very different from the ones you attract by the traditional university track. And creating apprentissage in many of our organizations is leading a lot of people coming with very good skills, but that were before having to choose between taking a job now with a wage or engaging in a more demanding, a bit longer track and entering organizations that they will outrule, because when they were looking for apprenticeship programs, most of the civil service ministries and operations and local authorities were not offering apprenticeship. Companies were, not the civil service. So if you were doing something, you were needing a bit of money to start your employee life in a way, you would look at companies offering. And so including apprenticeship also opened up a whole new pool of talents for the public service. And the last point is we created a number, a bit like the entrepreneur d'intérêt général, a number of recruitment programs were like more challenges. We have a very difficult question to solve. We put a question in the air. You can come for 2 weeks to help, a bit like in a brainstorm or startup mode. And by doing this, people were coming for the interest of the question and then discovering the interest of the mission. And then having a new dialogue with recruiters and so on. So there is new ways to touch pool of talents which are sidelined in a way by the traditional recruitment strategies. So to conclude, many of our important jobs in our societies are not necessarily attractive for the young generations. And there is a disconnect on how much is important and how much is recognized. So we need to really invest in the role models, in the imaginary, through culture, through films, through movie. I think in France, the Bureau des légendes series on Canal increased massively the capacity of attraction of the DGSE because it created a whole vision from the inside in a movie type, but quite realistic framing of what does it mean to work in an intelligence service. Everybody knew that James Bond is an intelligence service person, but not everybody is James Bond. So what does it mean? How do you work? And there is not a lot of publicity, of visibility. So, and also how you promote jobs that are very important but not well known, and therefore come the political support. You know, taking pictures with people doing jobs that no one knows about is very good for the people doing these jobs, but it's also very good for recruiting the next coming after them. And part of the role of, I think, leaders is also to spot and put light on people, on jobs, on profiles that nobody expects. Create some surprise effect of, oh, I can do this in another setting. Cyber defense is typically one of the environments. The ANSSI, our French National Agency for Cyber Detection and Protection, is one now of the most looked after place to start as a cyber defense expert, because also it gives credibility to your CV. People know it's very difficult to enter, and people know that if you were in a way trained there or worked there, you are among the best. And the exit employability of ANSSI is so good that the entry attractivity is one of the best, independent from the level of wage that they offer, which is in many ways indeed lower than private companies. So with these 4 lessons, work on the basics and communicate. Do not lock down people in because they need to understand how they can quit, move, evolve, and change. Work on the alignment of the values and responsibilities and show the pride of those already doing the job. Shed light also on the collective sense. And lastly, go and look for pools of talents which are outside your traditional strategy, should lead any organization, private or public, and we are talking mostly today about public, I think totally able to recruit those it needs to fulfill its important missions. Thank you.